Ship's medical log, Admiral Teag reporting. All signs of Star Trek Stockholm Syndrome seem to be gone from my fleet after the debut of Episode 7 of the finale of the show Picard, one of the worst programs ever made in the history of television, and certainly one of the 3 or 4 worst seasons of Star Trek we have ever seen. It was sold with lies and deception and caused serious problems among my crew. Now, since all of my medical people have been working around the clock for over 10 weeks to try to develop a vaccine against this, and we're only about 6 weeks from the debut of Strange New Worlds Season 2, I've decided that since we can't have a vaccine, since it seems to be beyond our abilities, I'm at least going to do some research on this phenomenon. Computer, activate the Emergency Medical Hologram.
Please state the nature of the medical emergency.
Oh, I swore I'd never use one of these things, but, my crew is pretty beat up after what's gone on. EMH, tell us how people ended up with this terrible Star Trek Stockholm Syndrome. And it is now recalibrating, and it's going to Psych2Go, a 21st century YouTube channel with 10.8 million subscribers. There's been 300,000 views since this was posted 2 weeks ago, right at the point the plot of Picard fell apart. Could there be a connection? EMH, give me the information from Psych2Go. Link in description.
When you think of abuse, what comes to mind? Physical abuse is usually the first thought, but not all abuse is physical.
Wow, okay.
Mental abuse is a form of manipulation and control intended to undermine one's self-esteem and make them feel isolated.
That sounds a lot like what we just saw happen to a lot of the crew.
Take Cinderella as an example of a victim of mental abuse. Isolated by her stepsisters and stepmother and forced to do their bidding, Cinderella found no hope, even within her own family.
Okay, so they were threatening her with more misery. And also, she was isolated and alone, thinking only they told her the truth. This is what happens when you listen to people like, the Popcast or Robert Meyer Burnett. Speaking of the Popcast, they have a slightly different outlook on this. I hate to say it, but you know what? They may be wrong. But let's stick with this signs of mental abuse for a while.
The most difficult part about mental abuse is that it can go on for a long period of time. Because of the lack of physical indications, intervention is much less likely to occur. According to Sherry Stein's PsyD, emotional abuse goes undetected, minimized, and dismissed by the abuser, victims, and others.
Let's hear that again. That's
key. Abuse goes undetected, minimized, and dismissed by the abuser, victims, and others.
All right, so the person abusing you doesn't even necessarily have to be aware that they're doing it. It's just hardwired into some people's personalities to take advantage of others. Speaking of which, the Popcast is a YouTube channel from the 21st century with 114,000 subscribers. Let's hear how they describe the show Picard Season 3.
What began over 35 years ago ends tonight.
With the final episode of Picard now over.
Thank God it's over.
We've all experienced a season of Star Trek we will remember fondly for generations to come.
That was a little joke.
Yes, pun intended.
They weren't joking, they were just punning. They do think that this is the kind of story that in 25 years people are going to break out like a Blu-ray, blow off the dust and be like, you want to know what real Star Trek is? Check out this Picard show about a robot based on Picard that isn't Picard. Picard was not in this show.
As we delve into this final episode, we certainly hope Paramount is prepping the team who created this show for their next Star Trek adventure to entertain us all.
So you can see where they're coming from. Now, the emergency medical program is going to continue here with information from Psych2Go. Tell us a little more.
Not only this, but mentally abused people are likely to put themselves in additional abusive situations.
So in other words, becoming antisocial and feeling isolated and being abused will lead to you kind of either lashing out or suffering from other forms of symptoms, which could include you becoming difficult.
According to counselor Andrea Matthews, those exposed to mental abuse in their childhood may accept abusive behavior as something normal.
Well, thank God my parents didn't abuse anybody, or maybe I would think it was normal. But when I see this Star Trek show, it's not normal to me. Picard season 3 was not normal. No episode of any season of Picard is normal.
And be prone to entering abusive relationships without even realizing that the abuse they endure is very wrong.
So that is exactly what happened with Star Trek Picard. And why don't we go back to the Popcast to see what kind of brilliance they have for us?
And don't forget to stay tuned to the end to get a special inside look at this final episode directly from the mouth of showrunner Terry Matalas himself.
So right from the horse's ass, you're going to get some information on the Popcast. But I just want to say, this final episode 10 of this final alleged season of Picard, they showed a Borg cube that was about the size of Earth's moon, partially protruding from Jupiter. It was absolutely ridiculous. We would have seen it here on Earth now. We have the technology to detect something like this now. It was inside the storm on Jupiter, so we know that it was facing the Earth because we can see the storm. For all we know, there could be another storm on the other side. But we can see the red eye of Jupiter on Earth. Now, in 500 years, that red eye may be gone or it may be changed. It's only been around for a few thousand years, which is a tick of the clock in galactic time.
So you don't want to miss this episode.
You're not going alone.
And I will make it a threesome.
Okay, so that was inappropriate, but you know, they're already telling you that without them you'll be alone. I mean, that's isolation.
Knowing whether you're a victim of mental abuse is a first step to helping yourself identify the people around you in your past or in the present who might be your abusers.
In this case, the abuser is known. It is the Star Trek franchise as written. And boy, did they ever write a bad story. I don't know. We're going to go with Film Courage, a 21st century YouTube channel with 651,000 subscribers, and see what Film Courage says about a bad story.
What's the formula for a bad story?
I feel like there's many ways that a story could go bad. Not picking the right character to be the lead.
In this show, the lead character was allegedly Picard, who is a ghost and a AI robot upload of a man who used to be alive and used to have dignity and used to be smart. He is now an AI robot upload and a shadow of what he once used to be. He is not the right point of view character. Other terrible characters would include Raffi, who is a drug addict, stalker, criminal who would go to jail 3 different ways in our time. So, of course, in this show, she's a cop. Another terrible character would be Captain Shaw, who changed in every episode, and then at the end we found out he was only being racist towards 7 of 9, just for the hell of it, to keep up a brisk, ball-busting atmosphere on his show, because he had already told Starfleet she was a damn good officer and wanted her promoted to captain. This seems to have been her first time out in space with the Titan, because at the beginning there's some gish-gobbling where they talk about how they rushed her through Starfleet on a recommendation from Janeway that Picard backed up, and that she's not out there all that long, but they've made her a full commander. She's not a lieutenant commander, she is a full commander, and second in command of the USS Titan.
I definitely have read scripts where the lead character is much less interesting than like a secondary character in this.
I would say we're talking about Picard right here, and this is link in description for this one too. Travis Sapala is supplying the information.
Script, it's like, why are you in the focus here? Being completely plot driven to the point where we don't really have characters.
Well, we didn't see that problem in Picard. There was almost no story. It was not very plot driven at all.
If the whole story is just set piece after set piece, and we don't care about what's going on or who the people are in.
Well, that happened. That did happen. Although the show was not plot driven, it was just kind of set piece after set piece with filler in the middle, yo.
the cool set pieces. It can be as cool as you want and still kind of fail because there's not enough of a story there, you know.
Right. So that's in the show Picard season 3. What we saw was episodes 1 through 8 were one story that then they resolve, and it's almost like things are over. And episodes 9 and 10 are a completely different story, almost completely unrelated to what we've seen as far as what's going on. Maybe we find out what the big bad is, but I don't know if the Borg Queen is that thing that was stuck on Vadic's arm that was big on threatening everyone and everything, including Vadic. I mean, if the Borg were the big bad, I don't understand why Vadic was cutting off her hand, and we may need to return to Psych-2-Go for more info.
This is especially important as mental abuse can take a toll on one's mental and physical health.
So really, watching the show Picard has been something that I've done. It's like smoking cigarettes for your brain.
So with that, here are 5 signs that you've been mentally abused and don't know it.
Wow.
Number 1, empathy error.
This sounds pretty interesting. Empathy error.
In 2017, a group of researchers from the University of Berlin found that early life stress, such as emotional neglect and mental abuse, can cause genetic changes to the hippocampus, which can
I don't even know what the hippocampus is.
make it more difficult to empathize with others' emotions. Since the hippocampus is involved with unconscious processing of relational information, it is the central structure for emotional empathy experiences.
All right, so now we know what the hippocampus is. Psych-2-Go, thorough and precise. Something that the show Picard never was. In fact, you could make almost anything you want to out of that story. It was just headcanon. It was just weird, made-up stuff that didn't align with the next generation and does not align with itself. This show told you 3 different things that couldn't be true, that were canceling out each other, were all true at once, and people bought it. And you gotta wonder, I mean, is there a better way to do this? Uber Brands is a 21st century YouTube channel with 788 subscribers.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero?
That's an interesting thought and an interesting way to introduce the hero's journey. Let's see if this Uber Brands gets it right. This video has had 624,000 views in the last 6 years.
Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
He also collaborated with Bill Moyers on The Power of Myth, which was written over the course of several months of interviews at, of all places, the Skywalker Ranch, where George Lucas, of course, lives, the great George Lucas.
Retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth, or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar.
All right, so this lines up with something I heard from the George Lucas screenwriting book. George Lucas does have a book about how you can write your own screenplay. I recommend it. I don't recommend using his method of speed writing, where it's called the George Lucas 30-Day Screenwriting Challenge. And of course, the author could only be George Lucas. It's available on Amazon. This is what George Lucas says in that book. This is from memory. He says that the first 25% of your story needs to show normal life. The middle 50% of your story shows conflict and what it would be like and if normal life were taken away, and the struggle to protect normal life, to return things to a normal life, to the life of happiness, the carefree life that we see, or at least the life that's free of pain and suffering that we see. Now, I would point out that this does hold true for a lot of movies. And then the final 25% of your movie must show the achievement of having returned to normal life. So if you look at a movie like A New Hope, you've got that cold open where we have the attack on the Tantive 4, I believe it's the name of the ship. Then the droids escape, and we kind of see for a while normal life on Tatooine. And there was more to that part that was cut out. It's not quite 25% of the movie. But we see that Luke's normal life is rather pastoral for his environment, at least. And that while boring, he enjoys a degree of safety on a planet he's familiar with, and he has allegedly a loving family. But that would be some of the hero's journey. But, let's not say Luke didn't get abused. Speaking of which, let's hear from Psych to Go.
Let's say a friend is really upset because their pet has just passed. If your hippocampus is fully operational, you may say something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine how you feel."
I recently told someone that a person I was close to had terminal cancer and they didn't react at all. I felt like they were evil and robotic after they did that, so there's probably something to this.
You're letting your friend know you understand how they feel and you're there for them. If you're a victim of mental abuse, you may say something nice because you should, or make an inappropriate comment, or might not say anything at all. Now.
Wow, so the person who didn't react when I told them that someone I was close to was going to pass, they were being abusive, according to Psych to Go. And I tend to concur. I thought that was a passive-aggressive way to take a swipe.
If you've never experienced a pet passing away, you may not be able to relate, and that's okay. But if you...
I've experienced human beings that I loved passing away.
You find it hard to empathize with someone's feelings, this could be a sign of past mental abuse. Number 2, low self-esteem.
Now, to go and watch the show Picard every week, you do have to have a little bit of a self-esteem problem. Or in my case, in the case of my crew, we had a chip on our shoulder. This show was claiming to be Star Trek, and we were going to test that out.
Do you find it hard to boost your self-confidence and always doubt yourself? If you've been subject to mental abuse, you have consistently been put down, which contributed to a negative self-image. A study on self...
Now, by the way, if you've been a fan of Star Trek, you've been called every name in the book. So, let's go back to what Psych to Go just said. It was very key.
Consistently been put down, which contributed to a negative self-image. A study on self-esteem in adolescence,
right,
by researchers from the Hubert Kairuki Memorial University, found that psychological maltreatment and self-esteem are negatively correlated.
All that is huge.
This study also found that victims of mental abuse tend to believe that they have little or no value to those around them, or even the world.
You yourself are the only one who knows how you feel about this. I don't know if it's part of the Star Trek Stockholm Syndrome, but certainly Travis Sapella can tell us a little more about what went wrong for Terry Matalas.
Not having any kind of connection, I think, is probably the biggest bad thing that you'll see in a script is, having the wrong character or not caring about the character.
All right. We had some legacy, care, and sentiment left over for these characters, and that's the only reason it worked at all. That's the only reason it worked at all. We still liked Riker. We still liked Crusher until we saw how she acted. But that was why this was a bad story, because really after episode 3 we didn't care about any of these people at all, or anyone in the galaxy, or whether they succeeded or not.
I know that anti-heroes are like a big thing nowadays, like the Joker movie and Breaking Bad, the series of, and so a lot of people think, because it used to be that, you have to like the character. Well, you don't necessarily.
Okay, so we found a show full of unlikable anti-heroes here. Let's see what Travis Sapella has to say here from Film Courage.
Really have to like the character. No, if anybody liked the character in Joker, there's something wrong with them.
Well, I mean, I liked watching him, but I understand what you mean about liking him. Yes.
It's a good movie, but it's like if you can get on board with that character doing those awful things, there might be something wrong with you. But the thing is, you care about the character because you know they're.
There you go. You have to be invested and care about the character. You don't necessarily have to like them. What we saw here was unlikable characters that no one cared about. It was impossible to care about anyone in Picard, especially after it started to become obvious that everyone's going to be okay no matter what happened. In the show Picard, no character of any importance dies. They fridge 2 new characters, and what that means is they invented these characters just to destroy them.
They're doing the bad things, but like you're seeing, in addition to the bad stuff, you're seeing like the human side of the character, and there's something that you can connect to. You know, like Taxi Driver, even, which, again, is a similar story to Joker and stuff. They're doing the bad stuff, but like they've got human.
I think we all already sort of knew that Joker was sort of that way. You didn't need me. But fridging is a trope used in writing, and no one uses more tropes than Bad Reboot. And Overly Sarcastic Productions is a YouTuber with 2.13 million subscribers. Link in description. What do they say about fridging in Trope Talk?
This video was sponsored by World Anvil.
Okay, we don't need to know that. Let's just run through this commercial because gosh knows these historical records can be sketchy.
I've talked about this before in its own Trope Talk, but character deaths are a big deal. They're momentous occasions both in story and out, because not only is the character dead, which is obviously a bummer on its own, but it also means the total loss of all future potential for a given character.
Alright, so we have found that people don't stay dead in this show. In fact, I predict if they get another show spun off of this one, which is all this show is about, we'll see Captain Shaw as a CGI ghost in the holodeck, if not something dumber. They may resurrect him completely.
All their arcs, dynamics, relationships, everything, all lost in exchange for a one-shot gut punch. Now, most authors recognize that this is a hefty loss for their story, so they make damn sure the impact is worth the price.
We've never seen that work out in this show. What does the Popcast have to say?
Do you even hear yourself?
And stay tuned until later, where we'll be showing you the last wallet you'll ever want to own.
Well, that's ridiculous that they have sponsors and we only have fake sponsors. Raid Shadow Legends gives us no money. The OG turn-based fantasy strategy game.
This episode ended with our Next Generation crew learning the Enterprise D has been lovingly repaired by Geordi, and they are going to use it to stop the Borg before they can assimilate Earth.
It's not quite exactly the chain of events, but it's close enough. The Earth had been mostly assimilated as soon as the Borg turned on the tech that they've had in place for 35 years that they planted inside of Jean-Luc. We don't know why they waited till now. Setting this off during the events of the movie First Contact, where you turned 44% of everyone on Earth, everyone under 25 years old, into a Borg drone via radio beacon, that would have been really useful. And the fact that the Borg have had this ability for so long and never chosen to use it, it's incredible.
As Picard says engage, with authority, the D leaps to warp, and they are off to save the galaxy one more time.
Yeah, I guess that's true, Popcast, but why do I feel like it was bad writing anyway?
Humanistic things about them, you know, that connects you.
Things that would connect me to a character, like the way I can't connect to the fact that a couple of these characters are merely robots.
Where, and like even in superhero movies, you know, like those quotes from some famous directors that we won't throw under the bus, you know, superhero movies, you know, they're just like a roller coaster ride or whatever.
That would be Martin Scorsese. I mean Martin Scorsese, of course. He's a great filmmaker.
He said it was, and it's like, but you know, if like superhero movies done well, you care about the character. Like that's the thing that like Marvel does really well, you know, in their movies, is that you care about the superheroes. It's not.
Now remember, this video is 2 years old. You had a different feeling about the Marvel superheroes then. This would be how we felt after, say, Avengers Endgame, still, when there was goodwill. So Travis Sapella telling us nothing but the truth here. Let's hear what Trope Talk has to say about fridging characters.
True, non-fake out main character deaths are often heroic sacrifices, protracted tragedies, or carefully woven resolutions to their arcs after all the loose ends have been tied up. They're
Makes sense.
usually given time and narrative weight to reflect this cost. The surviving characters will process their grief, reflect on what the loss means to them, and are often fundamentally changed by the experience.
Alright, so they give us enough of an introduction to Devine, the communications, apparently, officer on the Titan, to sort of feel some familiarity for her. We like Devine because Devine is on the good guy's side, so she default gets credit for that. Unfortunately, she gets deleted by one of the founders on the bridge because it was time to make us feel bad. We only knew exactly enough about her to feel bad that she was fridged and deleted, and that was it. She was deleted with a deletion gun that made the same effect as the snap. It was the same exact effect that destroyed Devine. So that's fridging.
Maybe carrying on their legacy, setting off on a lengthy quest for vengeance, or viewing their layered and complex life as a personal inspiration to guide their way forward.
So you can see how bad the fridging of Devine was, in the sense that there was no weight to it. We didn't feel bad for her. We didn't feel like we wanted to see her. And we need to check in with Psych to go to see about the signs of whether or not you yourself have been the victim of mental abuse.
They may also think that the world is unsafe and believe many others will abuse them as well. If you're someone who usually thinks lower of yourself, think back. Do you have someone around that constantly puts you down?
I would say the public relations from Paramount Plus has been an ongoing put down. The things they say about the people who don't like their shows. Oh my God, he likes Hilter. Oh, he's a Yahtzee.
You may be a victim of mental abuse. Number 3. Yes to all. When someone cares about you in any capacity, they don't want to see you upset or controlled.
Right. No one would sit back and let someone else be mentally abused, which is why we stood up against the Picards show.
According to psychologist Jay Reed, self-absorbed caregivers may be a root of why one might need to please others. The mental abuse they give might make you believe that others' needs come before your own. They want you to believe you're lesser than, so you're always trying to do more to gain their approval.
Alright, so saying that the show is good when it isn't, inventing headcanon, shaming people for being critical of it, allowing for gigantic plot holes, and overlooking really offensive behavior like ritualizing the corpse of Captain Kirk.
Do you find yourself needing to be perfect for others in every way, to be accepted and loved? Let's say there's one cookie left in the pack.
There's one cookie left in the pack.
Your mental abuser comes in and says, "You gonna eat that?" You could say no, so they can eat it, and this could make them happy, which means...
Okay, this is exactly what Terry Matalas and the Star Trek people did. They're like, there's only one Star Trek show left. If this one doesn't work, you won't get any more.
They may not say something mean to you. If you say yes, you might be called inconsiderate or rude. That urge to please others can be another sign of mental abuse. Number 4, self-doubt.
Wow, so trying to do things to make Terry Matalas feel better after he's threatened to cut off the supply of Star Trek certainly sounds in line with mental abuse. This guy might just have abused his fans.
When you say or do something, how confident are you that you're correct? We can't be right all the time, but mental abuse can cause you to question your sanity and sense of reality. We know.
So certainly your sense of reality can be challenged when you're saying that a show like Picard is good, despite the fact that the plot is contradictory and hateful to itself. This plot is hostile to its own story. The show Picard has 3 canonical seasons which are all hostile to each other. Every season of Picard is hostile to the other 2 seasons because it cannot comport with them. None of these events can happen if any of them happened. So you can only pick one of 3 stories and say, well, this is the real one. You know what? I choose to believe that none of them are real and we end in the Nexus.
Know this as gaslighting. According
Ooh, gaslighting.
to Andrea Matthews, LPC NCC, gaslighting is a main form of control for abusers because it can deflect blame and cause one to believe that they are at fault.
The fans weren't watching it right. People didn't have the right kind of interest. Wow, we're learning a lot from the EMH. What will we learn from the podcast?
Jean-Luc, wherever you go, we go.
This episode
Isn't that the QAnon? Isn't that the QAnon motto? Where we go one, we go all. What are they trying to say?
begins with the voice of President Anton Chekhov.
This is President Anton Chekhov of the United Federation.
I thought this was a nice shout out to Anton Yelchin and to Chekhov.
The original series fans will know Pavel Chekhov. This man's ancestor was likely the pilot,
Right, of course he was descendant of Chekhov, come on.
T. Kirk. It is possible that Anton is Pavel's son. Pavel was 22 years old when he joined the Enterprise in 2267. He was son right around 2300 and lived into the 2440s, since the average life expectancy of his time was 100 years.
Okay, I could believe that, especially since the crew of the Enterprise and the Enterprise A keep working into their 60s and 70s in this world where they would have been absolutely sad.
That means Anton could be his son and is delivering this message at near 100 years old, with current life expectancy.
Yeah, I had said that as well. So that's what the podcast has to tell us. And wow, what a terrible ending we got from the Picards series, where the Q pops into Jack Crusher. He can't be Jack Picard, would he? I mean, who would do that? For 23 years, he's been Jack Crusher. That's been his identity. If he is so lost as to become Jack Picard, I don't know what to tell you. But we didn't get an answer on that. We just got the cue telling him that everybody in the universe is in jeopardy for the rest of Jack's life because he's going to keep the trial going.
But don't. Suddenly, we see the Enterprise G in front of a star.
Right. Now, this would fall under lying to you. We'll talk about that later, but let's talk a little more about the trope of fridging for a second.
This is not that trope. Fridging is the cute shortened form of the full name of this trope, Stuffed in the Fridge, named for a now infamous issue of a Green Lantern comic where Green Lantern Kyle Rayner's girlfriend is murdered by the villain Major Force and stuffed in the fridge for him to find when he gets home.
That is something I didn't know.
Fridging is the very specific subset of character deaths wherein a character is unceremoniously and brutally killed specifically and solely for the narrative purpose of hurting another, more important character.
All right, yeah, so that's it. Taveen was absolutely fridged. Trope talk is absolutely right. And that means that was part of the lying, and I don't know, Let's see what Terry Sapola has to say about how to write a bad story.
Not just this guy in an iron suit who can blow stuff up with, repulsor cannons or whatever it's called. Like, you care about him and his interactions with other people around him and his...
Yeah, he seems to be talking about Iron Man 1, and I would agree 100%.
How he wants to solve the problem.
That is actually really interesting. If you want to see Iron Man botched, watch recent episodes of The Mandalorian, which misfired a lot in season 3. Look for an upload about that coming soon.
If it was just a faceless person in a thing blowing stuff up, there's nothing there to care about, So that's probably the biggest bad thing people do, is not giving us something to hold on to for the character.
Wow, so the characters need to be tactile enough. There needs to be something to hold on to. Throughout the series Picard, we saw people acting dishonorably and lying. The only things that we had to feel good about them were left over from 35 years ago. They haven't done anything that's been really particularly pleasing to us since.
Character.
Do you think that the level of empathy has improved? Like, forgive me, I don't know much about
I'm not sure where she's going with this.
the superhero genre, so I'm hoping you can educate me on it.
Sure.
So let's take Christopher Reeves as Superman in the 80s.
As you should.
All right, yeah. So,
all right.
Do you think that version of Superman has evolved in terms of some of the humanistic qualities they give to him?
So now we're going to talk about how characters change, and I guess we'll get an opinion on whether it can be done right or if it can be done wrong. Maybe we'll get both. Let's hear it.
So like if we were to compare that one with like some of the more recent Superman, I love Christopher Reeve as Superman. I love Henry Cavill as Superman.
We all feel that way. That's definitely true. We loved them both in the role, but only Christopher Reeve got to play a true Superman, in my opinion.
They're fantastic, but they're very different Supermen.
This cannot be argued. They were completely and fundamentally different. In fact, Zack Snyder's Superman was like more likely to be called mass collateral damage man by people around him than Superman.
Movies, obviously, the tone is much darker in the new one than the one in the 80s.
Different time, also.
Yeah.
Different things in the world.
But there's still, in each of them, they still have human traits. Like, they're this alien from outer space who has godlike powers, but they were raised as a person, you know? So.
All right, so basically we've just seen that you can have the same character done good and done bad, because it didn't work in the Man of Steel movies. It didn't work in Batman vs. Superman. Clark Kent made no sense. He wasn't empathetic. He wasn't relatable. You couldn't feel anything for that character. What you got was a really cool 7 or 8 minute fight in a parking garage.
If you've been frequently gaslit in the past, you might have low confidence in your abilities and subject yourself to a lot of self-doubt.
If you ever wavered on the idea that this was anything but a bad story, I don't know. I mean, maybe you do have a higher capacity for self-doubt than I do, because to be honest with you, the idea that you wouldn't have doubts that this story from these Star Trek people would be good is beyond me. I mean, you should have been resolute in the idea that they had to prove you right and that you didn't owe them anything after the way their goodwill has been squandered. You wouldn't keep around a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, significant other, for the amount of time it's been since the last time Star Trek was good. I mean, they have, like, let's say that nothing happened for a while, but since 2009, Star Trek has been a horrible, horrible franchise. That's 14 years. Would you stay in a bad relationship for 14 years? Would you let someone abuse you for 14 years? If you're still accepting this from them, if you're not sus of them, I don't know what to tell you.
You might also not trust yourself or your instincts as a result of being in a mentally abusive situation. And number 5.
Wow, so that feeds off itself. If they abuse you, your behavior lends itself to further abuse.
Fatigue.
Wow. So being exhausted from it and tired, this might be related to why people who are depressed sleep a lot.
You find yourself feeling exhausted almost all the time? I don't mean tired like I need a cup of coffee to wake me up. I mean actual fatigue, where if you lied down, you would actually pass out.
All right, interesting stuff here. I can't say I know anything about it, and don't take medical advice from me. This is a Star Trek channel where we talk about sci-fi.
While one might not expect that mental abuse can affect and drain someone physically, it certainly can.
I guess. All right.
A study from KU Leuven in 2001 found a correlation between people who have experienced childhood emotional abuse and neglect and having chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia during adulthood.
I don't know about that one. The Emergency Medical Program has certainly told us a great deal about that. Let's find out about the hero's journey.
Special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern?
Let's see.
Status quo. That's where we start.
That's how George Lucas likes it.
1 o'clock. Call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2
Interesting.
o'clock. Assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older.
So, okay, if you use Star Wars A New Hope, he goes and finds old Ben Kenobi, who gives him a lightsaber.
Wiser. 3 o'clock. Departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his...
We need transport to Alderaan, and no questions asked.
normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore.
This is all more or less what we saw in a movie like Star Wars and A New Hope, or Star Wars 77. But I don't know. Did we see any of this in Picard? Things start batshit. Things stay completely batshit. We never have a normal moment. The world doesn't stop to breathe ever in the show Picard, because it's not episodic. It's a 10-hour marathon where they can't give you anything about their lives. We don't know anything about these people except that they're under threat and scared and running. That's all we got.
4 o'clock. Trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap.
Alright, so getting out of the trash compactor after saving Leia.
5 o'clock. Approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear.
Okay, in the case of A New Hope, I suppose it would be Obi-Wan is killed.
6 o'clock. Crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and
Can't believe he's gone.
possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock.
From the moment he starts shooting back at those TIE fighters and resisting more actively in his attempt to aid the rebellion, Luke Skywalker is somewhat becoming reborn, harder and angrier, with a thirst for justice.
Treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock. Result. This can
Interesting way of putting it.
vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world?
Alright, so The Hero's Journey, according to Joseph Campbell, that's a video by Matthew Winkler and Kirill Uretsky, and that's on Uber Brands. Link in description. Well, certainly I've been vexed and angered by the show Picard, and we had nothing but lies from them, and that continues in what they're calling an after credit sequence, which happened during the credits, which happened while the characters were still on screen and still engaged in an active conversation. It jump cut to the new Enterprise flying past the loudest sun in the world.
And we are in Jack's quarters. He sets up a model of the Enterprise D.
Yeah, why he would do that, I don't know.
And then he sets a picture of his parents in place.
And they're dressed in 1960s clothes or 1980s clothes, possibly. They're wearing a tuxedo, and she appears to be wearing a coat over, whatever, is under her coat, I guess a ball gown. They're probably going to the premiere of, like, the final episode of The Next Generation or one of the movies, This looks like a red carpet picture of Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden.
And then we hear a voice. A voice we
By the way, Jack pulls out his deletion gun.
thought we'd never hear again.
But look at you. A chip off the old block.
It's the voice of Q, played by the Star Trek legend John Delancey.
So we could have used the Q to save this story. They chose not to. They chose to leave Picard a robot so that there would be no stakes. We can re-upload Picard anytime his body is destroyed.
He tells Jack, well, look at you, a chip off the old block. Jack knows who he is. Jack tells him he thought he was dead. As we remember at the end of Season 2 of Picard, Q told Picard...
Now, I have said this before. If you are existing outside of time and space, if you die, what difference does it make? You exist outside time and space. You've lived outside time and space. You can just be anywhere, as a character. They can have you pop up anywhere. You don't have to have, you don't have to still be technically alive to have time traveled forward if you're able to time travel everywhere. Doctor Who, a finite lifespan before regeneration, and then allegedly a hard cap on regenerations, but that's a whole other video.
Picard, he was dying, and we had a wonderful final moment between Jean-Luc and Q. But Q tells Jack he had hoped the next generation wouldn't think so linearly.
That means don't think about it at all.
Tells Jack he has much ahead of him. Jack...
that they're going to go ahead with this story and try to get their reboot. They ended the show with everyone in jeopardy and absolutely no resolution whatsoever. Just like I predicted, the show didn't end, the show stopped.
You kidding me? We pulled our mouths off the floor in this moment as we realized...
Not me!
...that Terry Matalas and his team have truly set up a whole new show for us to explore. And...
I have been saying that this was either a movie pitch or a bid for another show since before it came on. I have been saying it. It is on record. Everyone knows I said it. This was so cynical and so dark and so boring, and they will just get rid of this forgettable bridge crew from this show and bring in anyone else to be on.
And frankly speaking, we and nearly every fan we know is going to be devastated if we don't get this.
Yeah, I want it. Yeah, I want it.
Why would you ever be devastated? Why would you ever be devastated from not getting more of this show? They're just showing here that they don't know what they're doing or talking about, and that they themselves are really incompetent. The idea that every Star Trek fan needs this show is just crazy. No one needs this show. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of noise from space there. It's because we have been navigating through a really dense debris field of new Trek ships. They have been a problem. Nobody is happy about them, and nobody enjoys them. But let's go back to Psych to Go and get a little more about emotional abuse. We had heard about a few things like low self-esteem, and we had heard about self-doubt, and we had moved on into fatigue, which I don't know how much it plays into it, but really it's some of the earlier things that they said that really make sense, like the empathy error.
1. Empathy error. In 2017, a group of researchers from the University of Berlin found that early life stress, such as emotional neglect and mental abuse, can cause genetic changes to the hippocampus, which can make it more difficult to empathize with others' emotions.
That would seem to be true for these writers who had no emotions whatsoever. This show seems to have been written by ChatGPT.
Since the hippocampus is involved with unconscious processing of relational information, it is the central structure for emotional empathy experiences.
All right, so an empathy error could figure in, but this is the part they're really counting on.
Number 2, low self-esteem. Do you find it hard to boost your self-confidence and always doubt yourself?
Every character in this show has low self-esteem, and they're trying to manipulate your self-esteem by writing these stories this way. They're trying to get inside your head and make you feel bad about yourself because you're not like these stupid characters who have magical solutions to everything. Don't feel bad. No one is like the characters in these horrible shows.
If you've been subject to mental abuse, you have consistently been put down, which
You've been called names by this show. You have been put down by this show.
Contributed to a negative self-image.
You feel bad for the creators of Star Trek because of the way they've abused you. This is something they've been trying to induce in the fandom.
A study on self-esteem in adolescence by researchers from the Hubert Kairuki Memorial University.
We heard this already, but let's hear it one more time.
Found that psychological maltreatment and self-esteem are negatively correlated. This study
Wow.
also found that victims of mental abuse tend to believe that they have little or no value to those around them, or even the world.
Now, that is absolutely how every character in this terrible story felt about themselves and the world. What can I tell you? Star Trek Stockholm Syndrome is abating in my fleet, but we've been through hell. Do not let this terrible disease affect your life. This is Admiral Teag. Thank you for listening, and please hit those like or follow buttons. Admiral Teag out.